This is Breaking Down Security, and I am Brian Brake. Welcome back, listener. This is Brian, Mr. Betcher, and Miss Berlin's gone again for Breaking Down Security.
That's okay.
Is it?
That's okay, because, yeah, we have a third party here.
That is true. We actually found another replacement for Miss Berlin this week. Had to dig deep, but I think everybody would be really happy with this. Mr. J. Beale is here this week. Welcome, Mr. Beale, to the show.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Right on.
I hope I can stand well in her spot.
Yes. I'm sure you will suffice. We so for people who don't know who you are, could you maybe explain where you are in your career, how you got to be where you're at in your career, and tell us a bit about your origin story.
Oh wow! I didn't know I'd be asked for an origin story. Okay, so let's see. I'm one of the founders over at Inguardians, and I help run the firm day to day. It's we started the company about 14 years ago, and it's been a blast. We've had a number of really cool people work here for a long time, and some of them are still here, and some of them have moved on. But it's that honestly, Inguardians, and I've gone into its origin story for a second rather than my own. But Inguardians started out when a bunch of SANS instructors and a BlackHat instructor, that's me, were getting out of teaching their classes and giving talks. We're getting a lot of requests for consulting work, and after a little while of us kind of calling each other up and saying, "Hey, I've got this thing that needs 3 people, and I'm only one. Can you help out?" Calling another guy and saying, "This is your specialty." We said, "Let's put something together," and so we created Inguardians. And we didn't initially think we were going to hire even a single employee, and we've had quite a few over the years. But it's been really, really great work. The company kind of started was almost bootstrapped by all the work we got out of our students coming and asking for us to come do consulting work or referring us around, and then also from a big grant from the Department of Homeland Security to detect and break out of virtual machines. And so we had, I think, the first public breakout of VMware out of a VMware virtual machine. And
wow.
And that was a lot of fun. And since then, we've been doing a heck of a lot of work, from red teaming and penetration testing to defensive work, where we're helping to figure out how to get better defenses, make it a lot harder for us to operate. We've done all kinds of cool stuff. Hardware hacking has been one of the specialties. Radio work has been pretty neat. We've got just all kinds of folks here. Okay, I realize I still haven't gotten around to my own origin story.
That's okay.
Let's see. I was a math and physics major in college. I ended up I went into a PhD program at a pretty high-ranking school, and I was going to become a math professor, and I don't know what happened. Actually, at some point, I was playing around with Linux on the side while I was in my PhD program. I was kind of goofing off with that, and one day a friend came and told me, like, "Hey, what you're doing goofing around? That's a job." I was like, "Really? Like, you can't pay you. This stuff's way too fun. It can't be a job." And I guess a lot of us got started that way, but
yeah.
I went and worked at my first workplace, and really shortly in, they said, "What are you interested in?" I said, "Security." And they said, "Okay, we could do that for a little while. We have some projects. It'll probably take a couple months, and then you'll have to become a generalist." And a year later, I was the go-to security guy, and had all kinds of fun, doing critiques on whatever kind of snake oil the security vendors were sometimes selling us then, or building tools. And I ended up while I was there building a lockdown program, a hardening program for Solaris. And at some point, somebody asked me if I could make one for Linux, and there was this Bastille Linux project people had started, but they didn't have anyone to write code for. And so I was like, "Yeah, sure, I can knock that out. That'd be fun." And so that was back in '99, and I created what's been the in terms of raw downloads and so on, I think the most popular Linux lockdown program. Haven't been maintaining it lately, but it definitely, that really started my work in the space, and I've gotten to stay in Linux security as a specialty for a long time. Even though most of my work has still been an attack over my whole career, I still get to spend a fair bit of time on defense, and that's been really, really fun. And I got to say, for years, Linux was kind of left alone by security folks. Because all the organizations were running Windows on the desktop. Like you think about when you talk to a firm that does penetration tests or red team exercises, they're always talking about their first step being to get domain admin, get domain admin. I'm like, well, what about a Linux shop? And they're like, I don't know, get domain admin. And so what's been really, like since 1999, what's been really gratifying for me is just seeing so many more companies build businesses around Linux. It's become a bigger part of lots of companies, and there are companies where it's all Linux, or it's all Linux and Macs, and so we're just there's been just a ton of innovation and a ton of security need in those, and I've really enjoyed it. So. I guess that's my origin story. I'm trying to think if I have any special powers. Certainly in the course of working in the security community and going to conferences like DEF CON, I learned to dance. I'd like to say either really well or at least really spastically. I think of those as synonymous. I hope you do too. The more beats per minute is. I didn't realize beats per minute was talking about the music. I thought that was kind of talking about your own motions. 120. If you can move 120, if you can twitch your muscles 120 times per minute, that sounds like good dancing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So.
Yeah. All right. So we wanted to have you on because is this the first year you've taught this course at BlackHat and Defcon?
No.
I was asking, facetiously.
Oh, I was sure hoping. I was like, sheesh. Oh, okay. Apparently our marketing and advertising around the class has been really cruddy the first time. No, I'm actually, I started teaching Linux lockdown classes in, I think, 2000. And the first time I taught it at Black Hat was either 2000 or 2001. I think the first time I spoke at DEF CON was 1999. And it was a smaller conference back then. It was, I think I was DEF CON 7. It was the Alexis Park. And I think I was, Dark Tangent had made me an alternate speaker. And, but I never got any instructions on what that meant. And there was a talk at DEF CON. Priest was running the room. And the talk ended in 7 minutes. And so they had like 50, they had 43 minutes left to fill. And Priest is at the front of the room trying to figure out what to do. And I went up and was like, hey, I'm supposed to be an alternate. Can I just give my talk? And he's like, sure, kid, go give it a try. And so I gave the first DEF CON talk on Bastille Linux. It surely didn't make the program as a result, but I gave a lot of talks at DEF CON after that. But that was kind of a fun way to have my first talk.
Very nice.
So yeah, the Black Hat class has been running for a very, very long time. It's changed a lot over the years. We're doing a lot more advanced stuff than we were that first couple of years.
Okay.
You almost need to, right?
Oh, hell yeah. If you're not, if you're doing the same thing, you're not moving forward, and the attackers are. So on the defender side, you better. And heck, that's the thing I always liked about IT. I mean, when I looked at other jobs versus IT, or especially IT security, the most exciting part of it for me was that I was going to have to learn constantly, that you could never be done learning. And that sounded just as good as being an academic to me, if not better. So, that was what I always loved in school, and in the rest of life. I just want to learn shit.
Yep.
Oh, is this
yeah.
I say that S word? Is this an 18 and up podcast?
Do you know Miss Berlin at all?
Fair enough. Sorry. I realize that. Yep.
Trust me, you're all right.
Okay.
So one of the things you're going to be teaching at the class this year, and I should mention, because we're going to put this one out this weekend, that there are still seats available for this class. for both sessions, right? So you can get in on this Linux hardening class if you've never hardened a Linux box before and learn from, well, like a Jedi Master, if you will.
Or if you have crappily,
Say what now?
Nice. Yeah, if you've done it, if you've hardened it badly, as
okay.
As Mr. Besher said.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's still spots in the BlackHat class. I've actually got a DEFCON workshop, and I suspect that will sell out quickly. So if you've only got time for if you only have time for 4 hours worth of training instead of the full 2 days that we do at BlackHat, you can do that. The BlackHat class, though, is drinking from a fire hose, and I certainly enjoy being the fire hose. It's 17 hours and 18 hours if they'll let us keep the room for an extra hour someday.
Okay.
So we get sushi at the end of 2 days, and everyone's brains are melted, but they generally, at least my brain's melted. Everybody else is pretty much alive and kicking and eager to talk. So we have a pretty good time.
Cool. So is there any kind of like CTF or anything at the end of it that you have to worry about?
That's a good question. So there isn't a CTF at the end. There are some CTFs basically built in. We have what we do with it is basically there are a bunch of exercises throughout. Some of them are follow along, and others are here's a Linux system. It's got this kind of vulnerability. Go find that vuln. And it's actually kind of a full-on, single person capture the flag. So go find that vuln, and then you've got to actually use the one or two of the techniques that we've talked about in the class to make your attack fail and to block the vuln. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah,
I've been trying to figure out a domain name that might go with the exercises at some point. I'm wondering if would Breaksploit be taken already by you, Brian?
Breaksploit. No, that one actually might work. You got to spell it right though. Don't spell it with my last name, because then people think you're weird.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do it the other way.
Yeah,
yeah.
Okay, so one of the things you do talk about is things like AppArmor and SE Linux, and I don't know how it is with most people at their environments, but the first thing we do is we don't enable those things because it's a pain in the ass to set up. How can SE Linux and AppArmor be best defined? Are they like are they just hardening standard, or are they like an IDS kind of system? I mean, and what does it take to make those workable in an environment?
So the first thing I'll say is AppArmor and SE Linux are really at two very different levels of complexity to get them going. So AppArmor, the way I talk about it is that I could show you in about 15 to 30 minutes. If you really pressed me, in about 15 to 30 minutes, I could show you enough about AppArmor for you to understand it and lock down contain one program. Mm-hmm. So, and that's one of the great things about AppArmor is that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing, and it basically isn't. So in an AppArmor situation, you could say, okay, I've got all these programs on the system. I'm gonna lock one into an AppArmor jail. And so all you do is you basically create a profile for it if there isn't one already, and you run a single command to say, hey, start enforcing a profile around AppArmor. A profile around an AppArmor profile around that program. With SE Linux, you've got a heck of a lot more work. I can teach you enough to understand what the hell we're talking about with SE Linux in an hour. Okay. I can teach you in, say, another hour how to confine a simple program. And at the point, that first hour is basically just going to is what you need just to be able to survive in an SE Linux environment. And that's the hard part with SE Linux, is that everybody turns the whole damn thing off. Not everybody, but so many people turn the whole damn thing off because you can, but in general, the system basically is an SE Linux system or it's not. So it's either trying to protect everything except for a few things where you turn it off, or it's trying to, or it does nothing.
Yeah.
Let me kind of speak to AppArmor then instead. I guess, or either that, or I can do a comparison between the two. It's a hard one. SE Linux, I would say, gives you a heck of a lot more assurance, right? You get a heck of a lot better containment out of SE Linux, and it is, and I'm not going to say that it's hard. It's just got a hell of a learning curve.
Mm.
On the AppArmor side, though, so to kind of, you can use either one on any distribution, but by default, the Red Hat variants, like Red Hat and CentOS, ship with SE Linux. You can get SE Linux going on Gen 2. You can get SE Linux going on Arch or whatever. But most of all, you find SE Linux, when you're on a Red Hat system. On the other hand, AppArmor is really popular on Ubuntu and SUSE. So I think most of us, at least in our hacking work, are almost always on Ubuntu systems. I don't know why. I've got we got one of our brilliant kids here, Galen Alderson. He runs Arch Linux and loves it. It's a lot of work. It's a rolling distribution, but for most of us, we're just trying to get something done. We're probably on Ubuntu. If we're trying to build a server, we might be on Ubuntu, we might be on a Red Hat. I like building our servers on Red Hat when I can, because that means we're looking at SE Linux and we can do a lot more there. And I know what I'm doing. But if we're trying to build something quickly, I'm loving Ubuntu. So anyway, Ubuntu, AppArmor.
Yeah.
The cool thing is, like in a quick 1 hour session, you can learn to create an AppArmor profile, and it's pretty damn easy. You basically just run a profile generator program, and there's one that comes with it. There's also this researcher. She was a Docker maintainer. Now she's working on Kubernetes at Google, I think, and her name's Jess Frizzell, and she's made another AppArmor profile tool called Bane. And anyway, you just basically take one of these profile tools and you tell it to watch the program, and then you go and use the program and you exercise it and you do all the things. And then the profile tool says, hey, looks like you were trying to access these files. Do you want to let the program access this one file, or do you want to let it access all of the files in that directory? Or, actually that file kind of maps to what you normally use to need to do DNS lookups. Do you want to just let this program do DNS lookups? And you just kind of go through and answer questions. Yes, yes, no, yes, yes. And that gives you a profile. And then you go and try the program under that profile. And sometimes there's like one extra thing. And so that one extra complaint you throw back into the profile generator, and you end up with a profile that's pretty easy to read.
Yeah.
I guess that's one of the things I like about AppArmor is if I show you an AppArmor profile, you can understand it in about 5 minutes. If I show you SE Linux language around something, I kind of have to give you about an hour or so of basically just theory as fast as I can, and your eyes bleed a little bit. But when you're done, you'll stop turning SE Linux off. And an hour later, you can actually create your own custom profiles. And maybe, if you want to go pretty deep and create policies that create like profiles and policies that you'd want to distribute to other people, that's probably a week of training.
Yeah. So the SE Linux sounds like it's something you'd have to put on before you actually built the functional system.
Yeah, basically. You start out with a system that has it already usually. Mm-hmm. And you have the reference profiles. So you have, and the great thing is if you go into an SE Linux system, if you know how to use it, you almost never have to build a profile. The most you're ever doing is modifying the ones that came. Mm-hmm. And the ones that come with it are maintained by a really, really skilled community, and especially some great folks at Red Hat, including Dan Walsh. Actually, there's like a quote every time someone puts SE Linux into deactivates SE Linux, Dan Walsh mysteriously cries a single tear. So anyway, Dan Walsh is one of the people who helps create these profiles, and the profiles are pretty good. They even have these kind of like on-off switches where you can, called booleans, where you can say, okay, I want my web server to be able to, be able to read user home directories. I'll turn that on, and it's really easy to turn it on. So most of the time in an SE Linux environment, the only problem is that people don't understand it. Similar to if I put you at a Linux or a Unix that you've never seen before and ask you to admin it, it's you can kind of start to make a go of it, but you're going to need a little bit of training or reading. Even if it's self-training, you have to do something.
Yeah.
And you're just wrestling with a learning curve. SE Linux has a steeper learning curve, but once you're over it, you can easily stop turning it off. And then you get a ton of assurance. I mean, one of the big things I like with SE Linux is that AppArmor can't do is that SE Linux will confine what ports a program can listen on or send packets out on. And you can say, okay, this is a DNS server. All it's going to be able to do is send things out on 53, on UDP and TCP 53. If you want, you can even turn off the TCP 53. Mm-hmm. If you do, that's a pain in the ass. If you're the attacker and you compromise a DNS server, you compromise the DNS process on the DNS server, and you're stuck in this thing, and this thing can't write to any files in the system, or maybe it can write to a PID file or what have you, and it can't read much of anything, so that system's not too useful if there's other info on it, and it can't start a reverse shell back to you. Now you've got this thing that's it's like the toughest toughest rat or remote access Trojan to operate within, and it's a total pain in the butt as an attacker. So I mean, I think it's awesome. It's just that it takes some doing to learn how to use it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it kind of defines normality, right? And anything that tries to step outside those bounds is immediately blocked.
Yep.
A common thing in a lot of defensive tools like WAFs, right, where it learns what normal is and then doesn't allow anything else.
Yeah.
That's your goal. I mean, I will say a lot of WAFs at this point still are focused on blacklisting, on saying what looks like an attack. My favorite WAFs learn what normal is for the application, and so in my Linux lockdown classes, we work with ModSecurity, and ModSecurity is written entirely as a blacklist tool, so it only knows to look for attacks. But the first thing we do before we get into that blacklist thing is we look at a simple web form, and we say, okay, this web form's got 2 inputs or 3 inputs. We can make rules. We can make some rules around that and say that bad things are any inputs or anything from the attacker or the user going into that field that doesn't match this pattern. That's a bad thing. So kind of like we end up doing exactly what you've described, defining normal and saying, hey, if anybody steps out of normal, shut that stuff down. But that's not ModSecurity's the primary way people use ModSecurity. Because it takes more effort. You've got to basically go through and create a profile. It's all about define what's normal and make that definition tight enough that it blocks attacks, and not so tight that it blocks normal use.
Yeah. So the SE Linux, when I was doing some research on SE Linux, there's a permissive mode in that, which is what made me think that it was a lot like a host IDS, where it's like there's kind of like a listening mode involved, where it will allow things to go through and go, okay. And then I would assume there's a log or something you would review and go, okay, well, if we'd enabled it, this is what wouldn't work, or this is what would light off.
So that's actually, so SE Linux has a permissive mode. So the very first thing to know about SE Linux, the very first thing, if in terms of deciding what to do, is it's got 3 modes. Like overall, macroscopically, it has 3 modes. You've got enforcing, that's basically on. Mm-hmm. You've got disabled, never do that ever, ever, ever. Please don't ever disable it. And then you've got permissive, which is what you needed to achieve, which is basically where you're telling the system, yeah, let anything happen, just log all the stuff that would be in violation.
Yeah.
And the reason you want those logs is that lets you build up what Mr. Besher was just talking about. It lets you build up that idea of what normal is. So you're able to find out what would SE Linux block, and then you could even go later on and take those and take what it would have blocked and make manual or even automatic decisions and just say, yeah, we're just going to allow all that.
Okay.
I'm gonna say on the SE Linux front, they've actually to fight that learning curve, they've made some amazing tools, and one of those is there's an SE Linux troubleshoot daemon, and what it does is it watches for violations, and it looks in kind of a knowledge base of how you normally address that violation, and says, hey, here are two ways you can address that violation. Here's one, 98, with 98% confidence, I can say this is your best one. And with 2% confidence, I can say that this other one's your best one. And, no matter what, if you're running into those violations, you can clear them up. You're trying, the whole advice on that 98% or that 2% is basically trying to figure out what the best way is, so that as you're doing it automatically, you're ending up with something that doesn't loosen up the profile too much, doesn't loosen up the definition of what's normal.
Okay.
It's kind of like, yeah. So
how deep do the SE Linux logs go? I mean, is it pretty comprehensive? Will it fill up your hard drive pretty quickly? I mean, can you learn a lot from them? Can you shut them off if they get too cluttered?
Do
Can
they
you
look like Audit
customize
D
them?
stuff? I mean, I think Mr. Betcher's looking for Audit D type logs.
Yeah, so both SE Linux and AppArmor will produce voluminous audit D logs. There's basically the Linux auditing system. The Linux auditing system will produce a whole bunch of log lines for all the different violations. They will be voluminous. The nice thing is you can compress them. You can set up a rotating program that rotates and compresses. And the great thing about Linux systems with text-based log files or what have you is text compresses like, what is it, like 10-to-1 basically. So it gets real small real fast, and I can say that from experience because I've had runaway, I've had admins, luckily I don't anymore, but I've admin some mail servers in the past where at times you got so many freaking logs. You're like, I've got 100 megs worth of logs, and that's, I've got a 100 meg log file, and that's from the last 1 minute. What do I do?
Wow.
And the answer is kind of like, well, compress it in case you'll need it for later, and rotate, fix your problem, and move on.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I think the other side of it is that at this point, now that we're measuring our hard drive sizes in gigabytes and terabytes, it's kind of as long as you haven't done any partitioning that gives you tiny amounts of space, you're pretty good shape. I mean, even with a conventional AWS system where you got an 8 gig hard drive, you still have plenty of room.
Well, my question is more like, if you're logging network connectivity, does it still log the good connections, things that it seems that are okay, as well as the things that it might flag as bad?
No, you're just basically looking at the violations. I mean, I'm sure you could set it up to actually log freaking everything, but then it's more like looking at flow data than PCAP data, right? So you're seeing this is an initial outgoing connection instead of this is all of the data in the connect. I saw a packet, so on.
Right.
So so we have SE Linux, we have AppArmor. Linux uses things like jails. FreeBSD uses jails. OpenBSD uses jails. Linux uses shrooting, right? So can you use an SE Linux instance inside a shroot, or do you get any benefit additionally from doing stuff like that?
Sure. Well, so Linux has traditionally used chroots, where you do a change root and you basically lock a process into a smaller portion of the file system. At this point, anybody doing a chroot, well, I won't say this. Programs will individually chroot, but on the hardening space, we don't chroot anymore, or we don't chroot as much. We're all moving to Linux containers. And Linux containers are similar to BSD jails and all of the things that came before. And it's basically where similar to to saying, hey, this part of our file system that's root, you say this part of the file system, that's your whole file system.
Yeah.
So when you go to /root, you think that's /root, and that's really, that's really /var/named. But what we're doing now on the Linux side is we're saying, okay, for that process, it's going to get its own file system. So its /root won't be the real /root. It's going to get its own network card. It's going to get its own IP address and its own host name. It's, its IP address will be this other one, and we can choose how we're going to route it. It's going to get its own, its own process ID table. So it won't be able to even see the other programs that are running on the system, and so on. And so basically the containers are kind of giving these are all called namespaces, and you basically do the true thing, but you do it at a much deeper level. This functionality is built to the kernel now, and this is what Docker and LXD or LXD, if you pronounce it the way I do. This is what these depend on. And it's pretty neat. The security around those, to now come back to your question, if you have a container, so I can take a bind process or an Apache process, and I can lock it into a container. And then in that container, I can make it so that there's a root in that container, but that root in the container isn't the root on the rest of the system. The rest of that system, that root is just a UID like 65,000. And so now I've got this web server, and it's in a container. You can't see the rest of the file system. It doesn't have root privilege even for the first process. Heck, I can make the whole container not even have a root. And it's got its own IP address. So if someone compromises that web server, instead of being able to talk to every other program on the host, I can basically say, no, if you're this IP address, you can't initiate any connections outbound, because every program that's in its own container ends up with its own IP address and its own firewall rule set if I want. It can't define its firewall rule set. I do that from outside. But this stuff's gotten really cool. Yeah. And then lastly, you can take one of those containers and you can put either an AppArmor profile on it or an SELinux profile on it. And so the whole container is locked into that profile too.
Okay.
So
instead of using SELinux inside of the container, you use the container and then put the AppArmor or the SELinux on top of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
This stuff gets really deep. It's actually kind of cool because with SELinux, there's the idea like in government cleared work. There's this idea of compartmentalization. You have and what happens is if you run multiple containers or even multiple virtual machines on a Red Hat box, each one of them gets their own SELinux compartment, and so they can't communicate with any of the others, and they can't communicate with the rest of the system because they're in that separate compartment. It's really, really neat. I mean, it's like containers have like literally containers, whether you want to say it's Docker or whether you want to just talk about containers in general, they've brought kind of a real revolution to Linux security at this point, and that's where a lot of the forward motion is. Like we've started. The other thing we're starting to do in the class, and people are trying to make this easier to do automatically, but is starting to say, do you know what a syscall is? Yes. Actually? Okay, so yes. Should I give a description, or should you give a description?
Yes, please, just in case people are not savvy with what that is.
Sounds good. By the way, of course, I should say we've started on the deep end of the class instead of the shallow end, and I appreciate that. So a syscall, anytime a program wants to do anything, it needs the kernel to do for it, and that can be anything like open a file, or write to a file, or create a network connection, or so on. You have to call a syscall, and so these syscalls, like a lot of what a program does on a system comes down to syscalls. And the nice thing about that is that then you can say, wait, let's build a profile around those syscalls and say this program should only use these syscalls because we're able to profile it and figure out which ones it uses. And heck, we can even go further and say the only files it should be able to open are these or what have you. And so you can make that profile. It's called a seccomp profile, SECCOMP. And we can do that again to a container. Like normally seccom's been used by people who wrote programs where they wrote a program, they said, I only need these syscalls, so I'm going to, at the start of the program, say, I don't need anything but these syscalls. And now, and it's been tougher, but and I'll say that there's a lot of the newer software does this. This has been pursued a lot at Google. So Chrome uses containers. Chrome uses and Chrome also uses seccomp. We can do that with instead of just doing that in the program, you can do that with your jail. So you can say, I'm going to put this in a jail. I'm going to put an SELinux profile on it or an AppArmor profile on it. I'm going to get even tougher. I'm going to put a seccomp profile on it and say, this thing can only open, can only use these 30 syscalls. And that actually achieves two things. One is it blocks a whole bunch of privilege escalations that would go for kernel bugs, because a whole bunch of the kernel's attack surface is, of course, through those syscalls. That's how your program interacts with the kernel. That's, generally speaking, you are interacting with your kernel through a program. So yeah, if the program only has access to some of the syscalls and not all of them, you win.
Yep.
Or you often win.
So that sounds a lot like OpenBSD created something called Pledge, where certain applications only have certain access to certain system calls. And if you can't do that, then it dies. The process dies, and it doesn't go on any further than that. So
wow, that's really neat.
Yeah, sounds very interesting.
I didn't know about that, so that's really cool. I'd love to. I'm gonna go take a look.
Here, I'll post that in the show notes, and I'll put it in the chat window here for you. So there you go.
Thank you,
Jay. With SELinux on top of your Linux containers, isn't that a bit of overkill? Can you talk about the delta there? I mean, what's the advantage? Can't you do all of that with SELinux?
That's a really good question. So SELinux on top of containers, isn't that kind of overkill? And I'd have to say I think so. I think that so I would say, I'm trying to think of a way to put it.
What's the advantage there? If you can do everything that containers gives you in SELinux, is it just a challenge to get it working, or containers just
there's
easier?
Modularization there, right? I mean, if you only want that to be a web server, you can create an LX that will do that, and you can run multiple containers on a box, right?
Yeah. So I think that's, so a lot of the work in containers has been trying to put multiple workloads on a system without having to have lots of operating systems, the way we do when we run lots of VMs. And of course that gives me the heebie-jeebies, because we did at Inguardians, I want to say I only contributed a little bit to that, but at Inguardians they broke out of ESXi, and that was pretty hard. And security around virtual machines has gotten even better, but breakouts still happen out of VMware here and then. So containers are a much weaker, are kind of a much weaker. What's the word I'm looking for? A much weaker separation, and there's just been they were created initially not for security, but just similarly to hypervisors, just to let you get more workloads on a box. So if I had to choose between one of the two things, do I put SELinux around a program, or do I put a container on a program, rather than doing both? I choose SELinux hardcore.
Sure.
I want to be really, really, really clear about that. That said, why do I talk about both? I kind of talk about both partly because containers are, so first, if I can combine containers with AppArmor, I can do things that AppArmor couldn't do, and I can do things that containers couldn't do. So, so I get something better than both. At the same time, I think the reason I think about SELinux and about SELinux combined with containers is just because I can, or because I know that people are going to run things in containers and expect really good protection. And what I'd like to do is wrap that in some SELinux so that it's a stronger thing. The biggest reason I look at containers right now as a security tool is to replace all the TRUDing we were already doing.
Right.
And just saying, what can I do to make it a little bit easier to understand? I mean, I think that's the other, I keep talking I've talked a couple times during this podcast about, how long it would take me to teach you to do something. And, I combined AppArmor, where I can teach you to write your own profiles and, to understand AppArmor and write your own profiles in under an hour. In the container space, and I said in Selinux, it take you an hour to understand enough to like stop turning it off, and another hour for you to start writing really rudimentary profiles. So it's kind of, it's twice as long and you're not able to do quite as much. I feel like containers are they're about the same level of effort there as AppArmor. In terms of, in an hour, I can teach you how to deploy a program in a Docker container or in an LXC container or what have you, and create some, and you'll get a bunch of containment out of that automatically. And then I can teach you how to do a little bit more, where you pull users out, use the firewall and rule set and so on to get something a lot stronger than a chroot.
Yeah.
If you throw in seccomp, you've increased the amount of work, but you're getting even better assurance than say AppArmor would do on its own.
Yeah.
So I think it's in some ways, while they're not the same, while it's not really operating in the same way, you get a lot of power out of containers, or out of AppArmor, or out of the combination of the two.
Okay. So
Selinux is incredibly powerful. I keep running into this takes more time, and so it's harder to get somebody to stick with it. We get to do this in training class because I have you for 17 hours. So, in the space of 2, I can get you writing an Selinux profile. We have lots of other time to do lots of other things. But overall, trying to get somebody ready at the end of one conference talk, to be able to work with Selinux, it's not really doable. At the end of one talk, you can understand it enough to stop turning it off.
Yeah.
So it's not quite as exciting that way, I guess. And,
so here's a question. So
yeah.
you've got you got your Selinux. It requires policies or something to run, and you have 3,000 boxes. Now with Windows, it's easy. You just push down GPOs. Does Linux have something like, could you use Ansible or Chef or Puppet to push down your Linux profiles to minimize the administration? If you've got 75 web servers over here and they all are going to use the same profile, can you push profiles?
Oh, certainly. So yeah, on the Linux side, that's certainly where the orchestration frameworks, whether it's Ansible or Puppet or Chef or SaltStack. I think Ansible right now is the one that people are enjoying the most. It's pretty, it's pretty advanced. It's kind of third generation. The first generation, back when I was writing Bastille in the first place, our main thing was, there was CF Engine. So Ansible at this point is the kind of third generation, and you could certainly use it to push out policies. At the end of the day, the Linux policy is kind of one big directory, and some commands you run. So the file system is labeled, and there's a lot of state there, but the file system is labeled according to the policy. So anything that you do in changing a file system label, you also do in the policy, which means that just the normal way you run an Linux system, the normal way you administer Linux on a system, makes it really easy to say, okay, I've done it on this one, and now I'll copy to all the others, just manually if I want. And then if I can do that manually, then I can sure as heck Ansible-ify that thing pretty easily. So
nice.
It's certainly scalable. It's very much, I keep coming back to seeing the shift in the way we think about machines as we move into containers. On the Linux side, it's a little different than Windows. And I know that Windows will go there. That Windows is headed in this direction too. When you look at Server Core and you look at Server Nano, but Linux is moving into this place where more and more we're saying the machines are ephemeral. Ephemerals, but the machines are temporary. But you don't even think about, like, we don't even bother naming them because naming them would be, this is more like farming animals than having pets.
Yep.
So We're going to say this is the, this is the profile, or this is the, this is my Docker file or what have you for, for a web server, or for this given web service or this given, this given program. And then I'm going to go and deploy 5 of them or 75 of them. And some of them are going to crash, and that's going to be fine, because whenever one crashes, there are 2 waiting to take its place, and they're already running. And all of that's really simple.
Yep.
And so it's certainly pushing everybody to use orchestration frameworks over time to administer systems, to stop even thinking of systems as to always think in terms of scalability, because that's how people have started architecting software.
Yep. Yeah, it really vulnerability management with containers is a new realm for me, because it's like there are vulnerability management scanners and things out there that run agents. And it's like, okay, well, we can't put an agent on a container. So how are you going to actually scan all these containers? Well, we're not going to scan the containers. You're going to scan the thing that's going to, the mother, if you will, if you drink kombucha, that awful stuff, it has a mother and you've got the children and the stuff that come off of it. So you're constantly cloning the original to build your 75 boxes. So if there's a new vulnerability out, you're not going to have, those 75 boxes will go away, because you can just instantly clone 75 new boxes without, there's no patching anymore. It's just like, there is patching, but you just patch the original and then build 75 clones off of it.
You patch the recipe, as it were.
Yeah, you fix the recipe and you build again. And
it's a
huge difference.
It is, from a vulnerability management perspective, it is on the one hand potentially much easier, and on the other hand just scary as crap, because it's so much harder to measure. Mm-hmm. I will say this: if you wanted to, you could run an agent in a container. There's really nothing stopping you from putting that agent in the container. That said, the people who are pushing this new methodology would want us to just replace the container.
Yep.
Use the agent to detect that you have a problem, but then blow the container away.
Yeah. Plus, you run through your licenses if you put 75 agents out there on boxes, because current technology on some of these scanners do not unregister the agents once they're done, and they don't tend to gracefully deregister things before you blow it away. So it's kind of a pain in the ass.
Totally a pain in the butt.
Selfishly.
Yeah, very selfishly. Yeah. So
I'm going to say the other weird thing, for me is basically talking about how long do your containers actually live. So, like we have virtual, so we have virtual machines, and I certainly have, I still treat most of my virtual machines like pets.
Yeah.
We've got this virtual machine now. I've got 6 snapshots of that virtual machine I'm working with, and I can, roll back to different snapshots and so on, but I'm still not, it still takes me a little time, even though I've got a VM and I can clone it anytime I want. The VM's still 4 gigs. So cloning it means, cloning means waiting for that operation to finish and so on.
Yep.
So, I mean, we've had, the nice thing about being in a consulting firm like Inguardians is that we see so many different shops doing so many different kinds of things. And so, one of our clients, years back, a few years back, before containers were even that big, they were showing us how they replaced most of their VMs daily. And I said, okay, well, daily, what do you mean most? And they said, well, the ones that are patterned on, this was kind of like a Battlestar Galactica thing almost. The ones that are patterned on, on Cylon number 1, those automatically get replaced every night at midnight. Like, and the ones that are patterned on Cylon 5, though, those things are longer lived, so they tend to last about a week or 2. Well, what do you mean tend to? They're like, well, we don't really have any kind of process for that. It's like, well, then maybe once something's living for 2 weeks, you do certainly have to worry about, a little bit more about what's happened to it. This is starting to, this one's starting to grow on you. And I think it's the same thing with containers. I can start a program in a container, and that container can live for the next, 2 years. I mean, some people are using containers for that new methodology. Some people are just using containers because it lets them put more workloads, as they're called, or programs on one piece of bare metal.
Yep.
For the listeners who haven't seen this, who haven't seen like the difference in what you can do, I have a Raspberry Pi 2, so it's not even the 3. I have a Raspberry Pi 2. I don't remember how much RAM that means it has, but you know, it's got a 900 megahertz processor, 4 cores, and you could never run VMware on it. You couldn't run any kind of hypervisor on it. I have Docker running on it, and I can start up, 40 Docker containers. And if the programs that are running in those containers aren't too, if they're all running shells and all those shells are just waiting,
Yeah.
they'll all just peacefully coexist.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and they spin up like really freaking fast. You'll just be shocked at the speed of like starting a container and throwing it away, starting another one, starting 5. I've done it on stage, not from my Pi, not from my Raspberry Pi, but I'll be in a virtual machine and just start 50 containers in under a minute, and it's just kind of like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
But I mean, all you're doing is just telling the Linux kernel to start one program and to treat it a little differently than the others.
Yeah.
So
that's not bad. 40 Docker instances on 1 gigabyte of RAM and a 900 megahertz quad core processor, ARM processor at that. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Just can't do a lot with them. It tends to.
No. Yeah. I mean, like, honestly, if they're doing much, what I found was that if they're doing, I think I did this once on a I might have done it on a Pi 1, which only has 1 core. And yeah, as soon as that one program running on that 1 core is doing anything, you can't even tell Docker to go and add another one. It's like, sorry, man, I'm already busy. So,
Yeah.
It's kind of, if you've got busy programs on that Pi 2, you can basically have 4 containers doing something busy. But that's a lot to do on an ARM processor that could never run a hypervisor or could never run what we think of as a hypervisor.
Yeah. That is impressive. So, so what you're saying is that people take this 2-day course, they're going to learn all of this that we've just talked about and more.
Oh yeah, quite a bit. All of this and more. We go through all that stuff. We go through creating a WAF with ModSecurity. I guess I spoke to that. We use OSSec to create a kind of host-based IDS that you can distribute and you can do active response through. We do all kinds of things, just configuring and shutting things down. We get into Suhosin, which gives you some ability to make PHP programs a little safer to run. We do firewalling. We do something called port knocking or single packet authorization, where you can have a firewall where you port scan the box and you see nothing, and then you send a single UDP packet to an IP address that's not even the same one you have on the box, and the box opens its firewall for 10 seconds to allow a new connection in.
Right.
Just from your IP address.
Yeah.
So
we had a couple of guys, Evan and Doug, on talking about zero trust networking, and some of the port knocking concepts work for zero trust networking because you have to make the connections. And software defined perimeter, we had Jason Garbus on talking about that, and there's a lot of port knocking fundamentals involved with setting up the trust and setting up the connections that way. So that was quite interesting.
I'm gonna have to go watch that one. That sounds great.
Yeah. So I must be good. That's the bat signal, I guess. It's my work device. It just sent me the bat signal. So, wow. So if people wanted to sign up for this class, is there a place where they can go and get that?
Oh, sure. I'll have to. It's on the BlackHat trainings page, but should I give you a link? You can put it in the show notes.
Yes, please.
Okay. Let's see. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll find that about an eighth of all my tweets are probably throwing in a link to the BlackHat class. Let's see. Chat to everyone. There you go.
Right on. Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice. So you've got until, this will go out after July 7th, but after July 7th, it's $3,700 until the 21st to sign up for. So, and how many people on average what do they? Okay, so how many people find that they take this back and use it immediately?
I would say that everybody's ever taken the class, if they've written in and said they used it, they found it useful. And honestly, I'm still getting notes from people who took it 10 years ago. Like I did a webinar this morning uh, um, showing how to break an attack with OSSec, and one of the feedbacks I got from there was like, "Hey, tell Jay I was one of his students 10 years ago in this class, and I really upped my game. You'll use this stuff immediately. You will use it." Possibly, if you're depending on how paranoid you are and how much you want to defend your systems when you're when you're about to go into BlackHat, where everything you SSH to might get attacked right afterwards. People have gone home the night after the class. They eat the sushi and they immediately head back and start using stuff. Myself included, actually. I've gone to come out of the class and be like, oh gosh, I'm going into a hacker conference. I really should make sure my infrastructure's that much safer.
Yeah, you don't
and
wanna
that's
end up
not
on
gas
all
station sushi either. That's pretty good stuff, right?
No, we've got great sushi in Vegas. I don't know how. It's a
gas
desert.
station sushi in Vegas. Come on,
Yeah,
man.
really.
Richard. Come on, man.
So I'll see you at
Last time I had gas station sushi. It was I was pretty desperate and I felt pretty sick afterwards. It wasn't gas station. It was a grocery store.
Yeah.
okay.
But I used to eat sushi, once, twice a day. So it was important back then to be more economical with it. I've managed to find other foods I like now too.
Cool.
So I'll be seeing you at DerbyCon, huh?
Absolutely.
I'll be
So
seeing you at
Inguardians is going to be in full effect at DerbyCon. We're sponsoring the CTF, and we'll have a booth. So I don't know if that means that we get to give you hints, or we get to give you help, or if we just get to stand near it and look cool.
You'll just
Obviously,
give false flags. You just give false flags.
Nice, nice.
Don't touch the red monkey. Yeah. I don't even know what that is. That just came out like stream of consciousness.
I don't know either, but it's kind of scaring me. So yeah, no, well, I'll see you guys at DerbyCon, and God, that's one of my favorite conferences at this point. It's small enough to fit in one hotel and big enough to learn quite a bit at. So
yeah, I'm Mr. Betcher's taking. What are you taking, Mr. Betcher, there for training?
Windows kernel programming.
Yeah, and I'm doing the fuzzy knop training, the red teaming with Mr. Josh Schwartz. So
wow,
I'm thrilled. So
Inguardians does a self training. Gets to DerbyCon early and does a self training, or else I'd go to one of the trainings being held there.
Okay.
We get together and in a big rented house and spend a couple of days teaching each other and just building up the whole teams. Sharing like what have people learned on one engagement that we can pass around and just raise the whole team up.
So that's your annual security training.
What's that?
That's your annual security training. Instead of click, flash video, stupid questions, you're actually get together and hack.
Oh yeah, get together and hack. But it's structured. Like somebody's, like we, at least half I think almost everybody at Inguardians does some kind of conference training. So we've gotten pretty darn good at it, and we're always trying to get better. But we're also that makes us pretty structured in terms of like, okay, we think how long will that take? Okay, we'll double that. Now add 50, and add 50% more, and and so on, and like let's make sure. Our last all hands, we learned. Larry Pesci taught us both hardware hacking and software-defined radio. John Sawyer taught us social engineering. Adam Crompton and Tyler Robinson both showed us a whole bunch of red team techniques to keep moving. Galen Alderson taught us about some new automation he'd created for all of our infrastructure, for like building red team infrastructure and tearing it down quickly. We had, and I'm missing things in there. We had Suzanne Pereira, our PM, who like went through and gave us a lesson on managing projects and communicating with each other and with our clients. It's like whenever we get together, it's like, okay, it's time to teach. It's time to learn, Nice. Sit down, shut up. Here's your scotch, and let's learn.
Very nice.
Wait, I wasn't supposed to mention the scotch, was I?
No, it's okay. It's all right. So, if people wanted to reach out to you to ask about training or questions, or maybe they're looking for a company that can do pen tests, if you know one that does pen tests or red teaming or anything, how would they go about hitting you guys up?
Well, let's see. Here's my personal phone number. No, wait.
Oh, wow.
How would we do that?
I did good job. Little SE right there. Yeah.
Give me the company's phone number. So you can reach out to us. If you go to Inguardians website, I'll send the URL for show notes. You can go to Inguardians website and find the contact page and reach out to us. There's a phone number and email addresses and all that. We have at the Inguardian site, we have both a blog going and we also have an executive briefings you can sign up for. It's kind of like once a week you get a short one pager on something in security that's important that week.
Nice.
What it is and what you can do about it. It's one page. It's actionable and it's very quick to read. And it's meant to be very readable by a wide audience.
You can ransomware every other week.
It was ransomware this week. You better believe it. It was NotPetya.
Oh yeah.
But it'll be all kinds of stuff. So sometimes it's just honestly it's about techniques that we're using or that we're hearing are used a lot and what you can do to counter them. Cool. So Inguardians is you can follow Inguardians on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm just Jay Beale, JayBeale. You can honestly find me or Inguardians on Facebook too, and I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to think if we have a company presence on LinkedIn yet. I bet we do. So okay. And honestly, if you find yourself following Inguardians on Twitter, go and follow all the different people that we have working for us because they keep producing just really really great ideas. I'm really excited. Yep. In particular about one of the DEFCON presentations that we've got going at the labs is Larry Pesci and Galen Alderson are going to talk about this tool they've created called Vapor Trail, where they're doing exfiltration over FM radio, but without a radio. They're just twiddling the GPIO pins on a Pi and exfiltrating data that way.
Very nice.
Yeah,
Very
speaking
nice.
of which, the Inguardians team will be all over DEF CON. So outside of the BlackHat training I'm doing, I'll be doing a workshop once at DEF CON and DEF CON workshops, and then I'll be doing two repetitions of a different workshop in the packet hacking village at DEF CON. And then you've got and Larry's gonna be joining me in the main DEF CON workshop. And that's going to be on AppArmor and ModSecurity, and then I think that's it. I think that's cool. In the packet hacking village. It's going to be Docker and containers. So
nice.
It'll be neat. It'll be fun.
Okay. Well, next year I may get to DEF CON. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever go to BlackHat because it's just a little too expensive and big. So. Either that or I'll do like B-Sides Las Vegas or something because it's just a short flight from Seattle here. So
yeah, you should B-Sides Las Vegas. I keep meaning I should speak there, and I should certainly attend there. I mean, there've been great talks there over the years. I've been noticing how much like cool stuff comes out of B-Sides.
Yep. Very cool. Mr. Betcher, if people wanted to ask you questions about hardening the Windows systems or, event viewers, did you see that link I posted in Slack today about, that Japanese cert that was using event logs in Windows to do pivoting, to watch pivoting?
No, you didn't at me.
Oh, okay.
I didn't see it. I've been working all day, so haven't had a chance to overlook that.
I'll send you a link to that. But okay, so how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to?
On Twitter is the best place, @BetcherPwned.
Okay, excellent. And you tend to get on our Slacker from time to time. You tend to be a Slacker on our Slack. So, Miss Berlin, she's gone again this week. We actually did this the week of July 4th. So she's out camping, she said. So that was pretty cool. She's going to be back in next week, probably we're kind of doing these out of order. So you can follow the show officially on Twitter is at Brakesec, BRAKESEC. You can follow me on Twitter at Brian Brake. That's BRYANBRAKE. We do have a Slack. We are on. We have a bot, so you can sign up on our Slack by going to brakesec.signup.team and putting in an email or something and a username, and you can join us. We have about 500 people on our Slack. Very active Slack. We have several channels. We have a CTF club going on. We have our book club doing the Defensive Security Handbook with Miss Berlin's book. Miss Berlin can also be found on Twitter at InfoSister, and she's also on our Slack at InfoSister, INFOSYSTIR. You can hit her up either on Slack or on Twitter. We have a job board. Jay, you are not hiring, are you?
We almost always are. We're certainly interviewing right now. So we'd definitely love to hear from you if you think you got the right stuff. We're basically, what that looks like is have a strong background in security, an ability to speak to management and to be able to explain what it is you found when you pop that box. Some penetration testing skills in networks and at least in web apps. Let's see what else. A strong love of sushi is also, I think, is a firm requirement.
Awesome.
So that usually ends up in the interview somewhere.
Okay, very cool. So yeah, we're doing. We just got done with our class with Miss Sunny on web app security using Burp. She took a vulnerable VM of OWASP's juice box vulnerable VM and ran through all of that and showing us how we can do it with Burp Suite. So we've kind of added an additional class that starts on July 10th. It's going to go for 6 classes. We're doing a PowerShell course. So we're going to learn how to be blue teamers and using PowerShell to, do digital forensics and incident response, and to use it as a blue teamer. And we have the Mick Douglas from Binary Security who's going to be doing that for us. So there are instructions in the show notes on how to sign up for that class. And it's $20 for the month of July, and then it'll be another $20 for August because of the way Patreon does its pricing. So it'll be a $40 class basically. If you can't attend the class and you just want the videos, it's $20. So it'll be $10 in July and $10 in August for all of the videos. So you can join us for that. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. We're still working on the CTF for DerbyCon. We do a CTF for a free ticket to DerbyCon. So if you didn't get tickets any of the times that they went on sale or any of the trainings and you still want to go to DerbyCon, we will be unveiling our CTF hopefully by the end of July. We have various people making levels for flags that you'll have to solve to get a ticket. So there it is. We're on iTunes, Google Play Store, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio app. If you are an iTunes user, please leave feedback. We enjoy it. And lastly, thank you to all of our Patreon supporters for helping us out and giving us a little dough to support the show and support to what we do is always free, but we appreciate the tip jar. So. That was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Jay, thank you for being here. You are always welcome to join us again. And, I said this before the show, but if you want to do, a couple hour training or a couple sessions for BrakeSec, it wouldn't go amiss. I'm sure you'd get some signups for that. So, I'm pimping out the outlet here if you want to, hook up for training. So
that could be really neat.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. All right. That was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Have a great week and be nice to one another, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.